Hello viewers, welcome to this video lecture series on C programming. Today's topic of discussion is on data types and its classification. So let us first see what is a data type. Okay, how do you define a data type? So simply in very simple words you can say data type is a representation of data. Representation of data is what actually you are representing a particular data. Data is what, see, you will be storing some data values like 20, or sometimes you will be storing 20.65. That means you are storing sometimes integer numbers, sometimes you're storing decimal numbers. So what type of data are you storing? Okay, what are the possible values that particular variable can take? In very simple words, if I am saying that the data type is integer, that means for that particular variable I want to give only integer values. I have to use the keyword int followed by the variable. Suppose the variable is sum here. Okay, this is the variable. I am declaring this. Now what does it mean? It means that sum is a variable and it is of the type integer. So the moment you declare this sum as an integer type, then what happens is in the memory a space gets reserved for this variable. Now suppose these are the memory locations. Assume that these are the memory locations. So one particular memory location with what the variable name you have given it as sum. See, if I have to write one more thing I wanted to tell you, if I have to write this in a syntax form, what is the syntax for this int sum? Int is what? The data type. So I can say that the syntax for this type of declaration is data type followed by identifier. Here identifier is what? The variable only. What variable you are using? Sum. What data type you are using? Int. So this is what you are going to write here in the statement. Let me take this memory location as 2000. So this is what the address. 2000 here is the memory address, and remember it is always a positive integer. You cannot simply use the word sum here, okay, in the declaration. You have to compulsorily declare what is the type of the data here. That means you are saying that you will be giving values to this data, to this particular variable only belonging to what category? Integer category. So that is why it is mandatory to declare the type of the data. I want to assign a value 20 to this. So in the declaration itself I can do that integer sum equals to 20. That means I am saying for the variable sum you assign the value as 20. Okay, fine. Now this 20 is an integer, so it is accepting. I can also assign, instead of 20 I can also write minus 20. This is also allowed. What is the difference? That was a positive integer, this is a negative. It is taking because it is an integer type, definitely it will take. Suppose instead of this if I write like this 20.3, then this is not allowed. The reason is you have declared the variable as integer, but you are giving what? A decimal number here. Hence the value can be a positive or a negative integer. See, this is just the introduction for the data type. Now you should know the classification. Broadly, three types are there. One is the primitive, other one is derived, and the third type is user defined. Once again, in this primitive type, int, char. See, int is what? Integer, but the keyword used here is int. So I am writing only the word keyword here. Later while explaining, I'll tell you the complete expansion of each of these primitive data types. For derived, arrays, strings, pointers, functions. In user defined data types, we have structures, unions, and finally you have enumeration. Now these derived and user defined, okay, these are the concepts which I'll be explaining in my future sessions. Now for the classification of data types, int, char, float and void. Let us see in detail the classification for the primitive data types. In primitive data types, as I said already, one type is the integer, the another type is the character, char is the keyword that is used, and the third category is the float, and the fourth is void. Void is nothing but it represents nothing or valueless also you can say. So when we are using the keyword void in future programs, that time you can understand it represents. Int is short int and long int. Similarly here we'll see for char, float and void. Presently now we have to see how many bytes of data it occupies. The short int once again can be for signed, unsigned. Okay, signed short int, unsigned short int, signed int, unsigned, signed long int, unsigned long int. So int is divided into three types: short int, and long int. Further, you can say short int can be of the signed one and unsigned one. Int can be of signed and unsigned. Long int can be signed and unsigned. Now, this short int, that is whether it is the signed or unsigned, it occupies 2 bytes of data. But the second category, that is this int, it occupies, whether it is signed or unsigned, it occupies how much? 2 or 4 bytes of data. The third one, whether it is signed or unsigned, it occupies 4 bytes of data. So that is the reason the signed is a positive or negative number. Fine, that already I said. Now only positive and negative, that means positive and negative values both are allowed here. If you declare a data type with unsigned, then only it will accept positive values. Strictly it will accept positive values. So what is the need here? Why do we want to declare sometimes int, short int, long int? The reason is, depending on the value for that particular variable, you have to decide. You should not waste unnecessary the memory. Sometimes what happens is, you are using variables which are going to store simple numbers. Like suppose you have the bus numbers written. Okay, bus numbers are what? You will write bus number 4, bus number 6, 8, 10. So for this you can always use short int. And suppose if you want to give values, very big values, like for example, see, your mobile number has got 10 digits. Okay, then your Aadhaar number has got many digits, your bank account number is also having many digits. So wherever you have the size of the value too long, that time you can use what? Long int. When your bus numbers gets stored just with 2 bytes of data, because you are giving the values as 4 or 6 or 8, in this case, if you try to declare this bus number as long int will always what? Reserve 4 bytes in the memory. But what is that you are doing? You are simply giving the values 4, 6 and 8, for which only 2 bytes are also sufficient. That means once you declare long int, 4 bytes gets reserved in the memory, but only 2 bytes are used. So that means what? The remaining 2 bytes are wasted. So this is how you have to decide that when to use the int, when to use the short int, and when to use the long int. Now coming to the next data type, char, which is of signed type and unsigned type. This both signed and unsigned can occupy only 1 byte in the memory. Then we have float. To give values as integer numbers, you are using the data type as int. Similarly, to give values as floating point numbers, you have to make use of the keyword float. Once again, float is of float double and long double. Float occupies 4 bytes in the memory, double 8 bytes in the memory, and long double occupies 10 bytes in the memory. So finally, what is the conclusion? The amount of memory space reserved for an variable or identifier depends upon the data type of the identifier. So let me write just this sentence so that you can remember. So this is the classification of data types in this session. In the next session, I shall discuss the minimum and maximum values that can get stored for each of these integer data types. So hope this session is useful to you all. If you find it useful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.